Does sexual liberation for women equate to real power, or is it just a form of performance?
Strength is not just physical strength. There's so many different types of strength.
A powerful man can have the playboy narrative, but if it's a powerful woman, it's not so much that.
Women are having a harder time finding suitable male partners because...
So how are you today, Tanya?
I'm doing well. Spring day, can't complain. Excited about the topic because we're on the other end, I think, of maybe perhaps what society likes to, stereotype or have a preconceived notion of what power is. And it's a very interesting topic. So
I agree. And so there are a couple of different, tiers or different perspectives to look at this. And this is under the heading of power dynamics in relationships. And so the question that we're going to, debate about today is, does sexual liberation for women equate to real power, or is it just another form of performance? And this has to do with powerful women being judged, that's the best word, being judged by their sexuality. So what are your thoughts about that topic before I get into the core equation of it?
I mean, it makes me automatically think of certain strong women that have been treated harshly for being strong, intelligent, have a high standing in society. Somebody like a Hillary Clinton that just got bashed for being a strong woman, which is interesting. And it makes me, the way society seems to be set up is certain definitions of what is strength, who's defining strength in a woman, right? So I would say I'm, as a woman, just, it doesn't necessarily feel empowering to be a strong woman across the board. I know we've all been in situations where we were too much if we, maybe not forcefully, but if we, had a certain way of communicating and or behaving. And so it feels limiting. That's what I'll say. It feels limiting as to how we can express our strength. Yeah.
Okay. I agree with that. I absolutely agree with that.
And women struggle with it,
Oh yeah, still struggling. Still. And so this, how we would introduce this, or the core part of it, is the focus on the intersection of sexuality and authority. Okay. And you're describing some of the historical and cultural roots of judging women's competence based on their perceived sexual history or presentation, like you described with Hillary Clinton, and contrasting it with the playboy narrative for powerful men. And so those are two completely different things. A powerful man can have the playboy narrative, but if it's a powerful woman, it's not so much that. So yeah, again, we're going to debate, does sexual liberation for women equate to real power, or just another form of performance? And so one of the questions that has come up in a session, actually more than once, young professional women ask how they're supposed to dress and behave in order to be taken seriously without sacrificing personal style or femininity.
Yeah.
So here we go.
And look, I wore my vest just for that, kind of to show, hey, you don't always, right? Strength can come in different attires, but typically, right, when women wear a suit, there's something about it, right? That shows they look stronger, right? They look kind of, I've seen several women that are in Hollywood that'll wear, Michelle Pfeiffer, she was wearing a suit the other day, but they always wear some sort of elegant jewelry to accessorize. And so it's you still have to, trying to morph the two, feminine and masculine, together. We all are, have to continue to, men can gray and they're still considered, they don't need to do anything. They don't have to usually put a lot of makeup on. Maybe if they're in some sort of movie business or on TV, they do wear makeup. But, for the most part, they can just get dressed and no one's really going to make too much of a comment. A woman will go through and pick out, however many outfits and, still be criticized. Oh, it wasn't just the right outfit.
Like, is she showing too much of her body? Is she showing arms or cleavage or whatever? And then there's certain colors. Like sometimes a woman may wear the color red, if she's, entering a room, or sit at the head of the table and she's wearing red, versus, men don't usually have to do anything to announce that they are the man in the room.
Power.
I mean, for lack of better phrases.
Yeah.
But a woman, it's like she has to do something to communicate that, like in the way that she's dressed, and like what you described, like meshing the masculinity and femininity versus this is just who I am.
For sure. Even when we see what are quote unquote powerful positions, there was so much harsher criticism for women who have achieved a powerful position, right? Kamala Harris got so much criticism just across every area of her life by being at the top. It's like oh, well, she didn't earn her way up to the top. She was, sleeping her way up to the top. And it's like, okay, she was attorney general, a senator, she went to law school, passed the bar, like there was many, many steps before she became vice president. And it's like all of it gets discounted because she dated a man that was higher at a point where she was, she was already an attorney and all of that. But it's like, oh, well, she used her prowess to get him and secure a position. It was like she used her young sexual self instead of her brains and her fortitude and determination to get there. So it's always whittling down women to they use their sex appeal. It's not because they're capable and have put in the effort. So it can be frustrating as a woman to think like but besides, like, who made those, who's saying that, right? When we think about like who is saying that,
who sets those standards on what she's supposed to look like. I can understand, like, in a professional setting, like if it's a baseline standard, like in the military, for example, they wear uniforms. Everyone wears a uniform, and it's to have everybody look more uniform. And then, that encourages, you're working as a team and working in a unit and in a squadron. And so everybody almost looks the same. That I can understand. And maybe we need to carry some of that over into the civilian world, because when you're in the military, a soldier is a soldier, an airman is an airman. There's no gender associated with that and no expectation of anything different. All of these people have to have your back if you're deployed. And so it doesn't matter. And so the colors don't matter or any of that, because everybody's the same. And I wonder what things would be like if we could take on some of that mentality on the civilian side, where everybody that's coming into the room, they're competent people. They got there based on, whatever the expectations were, professional or educational expectations or requirements were.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it'd be interesting. It is. I mean, there are some shifts happening. I think I told you about this, but even with the younger generation, there tends to be this blurring of the gender lines, where before, right, women, you had to wear a dress and a skirt, and that was it wherever you were. I know when I've gone to the gym and I've seen young men like in their 20s, and they're very, well groomed. I mean, even, eyebrows and short shorts, which when I grew up was not, basketball shorts, was long ones and long socks and 90s wear, I feel like there is, in the future, will be more blurring of the lines However, there's always a generation above that has passed down those cultural ideologies of what it means to be male or female, strong or weak. And so it's a constant, you might take a couple steps forward and then there's someone pushing back always. I mean, it's happening all the time. So I don't know that it'll ever fully go away. And you hear all these people who push back on both sides. And what I think is most informative for people listening is where can you what can you do when you find yourself in a situation where it is more restrictive, where it's maybe a little more rigid. Like, what do you think when somebody has to play a certain role to have their power or keep their power, right? Versus, can't we just, versus an area where, it's, based on actual merit, how you perform, what you're bringing to the table. Those are two very different environments. And so, depending on whether it's, most of this is going to be, in a work environment, it could be the field that you work in. There's, right, like we think about, like you said, the military. I mean, we've heard too, some military environments where men don't want to work with certain women because they think they're not strong enough to pull them or lift them up. I mean, it can be a thought that, they're like, whoa, I don't want her on my team because what is she going to do? She's not going to be able to carry me if I'm injured. And now, right, not everybody's like that, but there are going to be always some voices that are going to criticize physical strength when it comes to females. So
but strength isn't just about, like, it's not just physical strength. People, when we hear the word strength, I guess we have a tendency to, it's something masculine, or, can he lift this? Or, it's about muscle, brawn, but there's more than one kind of strength. And you have to have all of those in order to survive. That's why we've survived as a species, because you have to have strengths in different areas.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. I mean, right, there's nothing to, command it doesn't take physical muscle to command and lead a battalion or a troop.
Right.
It takes, military strategic planning and implementation, knowing when to do a strike and how to do it and all of that. So long gone are the days of physical power, because now we have arms that are well beyond any human capability. And so you would prefer, right, a mind that's strong, emotional regulation that's strong, because you have to be able to make decisions with, and the best decision when you're talking about things like war, or even in a healthcare profession. If you're unable to be regulated because, for whatever reason, you're stressed, overwhelmed, or highly emotionally triggered, you're less likely to be able to make a sound decision. So I mean, it is important to be aware that, right, strength is not just physical strength. There's so many different types of strength.
I agree. And so does this mean, going back to one of the original questions, does this mean that women are performing when they're in the workplace versus, well, we'll get to that part. Do you think women are performing and saying, well, because you said at the beginning, women get up and they do all the makeup and go through about 15 outfits, get ready for the day. So is she doing that for her, or is she doing it because she's performing for the male superiority in the workplace?
I mean, I guess it depends on what kind of woman and how she's affected by the pressures to conform to male attention, or if she's more inwardly confident about not needing external approval. She might be doing it more for herself. I think it definitely depends on the woman, her experiences of how she's moved through life, and in what ways she was able to achieve growth and attention, and where it was reinforced. I mean, I think to a certain extent everybody is performing at one time or another.
At work?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I can see that. Absolutely.
Because if we were our true selves at work, some of us, and maybe not all of us, I mean, some people are very rigid no matter what. It's like, take a breath, unbutton the top button and relax. And they do that even at home. They're so wound up though, it's uncomfortable to observe. Like, you can just see it. They're like always just wound tight. It's like, how do you relax? But I would say for the most part, most of us at work in front of superiors, if you have a superior, you're going to perform as a good employee, even if sometimes you don't want to do something. You're like, well, I have to, because this is what is expected of me. And I have, some people will go even further, right? They don't want to be looked upon as bad workers or bad employees, that they will even go even further. Like they can't even, they come up with an image of, okay, if I'm, customer service, I can never, the customer is always right. Never deviate from that. Even if the customer is like chewing them out and cussing them out, they're like not gonna break. Then you have other people that are like, I am not here for this. You are not going to talk to me that way. So I think it depends. There's a lot of psychological factors, how people, view their world views, their values, they value respect, and respect on which side, right? Respect for others or respect for yourself. That's going to make you go one of two ways. So, yeah.
And who are these women supposed to date? So men get the power, and they're the playboys and all of that. And so it's expected, that they present themselves a certain way, and they're out there, being sexual and all of that. Well, what are the women supposed to do?
I have 3 words for that. It's called male loneliness epidemic.
I was thinking of another 3 words.
Yeah. I mean, there's quite a bit of 3 words that could go. Yes. But, that's what's happening. I mean, women are having a harder time finding suitable male partners because of the dynamic that has been pushed to the brink of, what is now what's wanting to be acceptable for women. Women no longer need, men to provide, financially. I mean, for the most part, a lot of women have their own careers, their own jobs. And I go around now, like at the grocery store, I see a lot of just single men walking around with their carts. And I'm like, wow, like, whoa, these men they're having to do everything themselves, which women typically took that part on, right? The women went to the grocery stores, men just, for the most part, it was always, or the couple was shopping together. But now I see all these like somewhat haggard men, like pushing a cart very uncomfortably, or like they have one basket that they're holding in their hand. And I'm like, something needs to change. I mean, the pendulum has swung. And so, women are going to date men that are meeting the needs that they now have. The needs are no longer, I need a man to provide for me financially. The needs are changed. So until men understand that, they'll be shopping alone for groceries.
Yeah. And I think too, well, you're correct. Like about like the pendulum has switched, like this new generation, like there's more of a blurred, and I hate to use the word like the gender is blurred, but when you look at it from that lens, like if you're being technical, it is true. Like people are not viewing the gender part of it as important, kind of like in mental health, how we switch from saying having a mother or father figure versus a parent, because that's what's important. The parenting part, the nurturing and being protective of your children and loving your kids. There is no gender associated with that. And the children don't know that. They just know this person is my caregiver and they love me, they protect me, they take care of me.
Yeah.
And and so I do believe that there is a blur now. It doesn't mean everybody's walking around and they're androgynous angels or something, but I think this is actually a healthy thing.
Yeah.
And it's when you're raising kids, it can help them to have a healthier view of how they're going to participate in their community, in society, versus being very rigidly thinking, well, I have to be in this box because this is about masculinity or femininity. I see how that's not. It doesn't produce resilience as a society or community when you're restricted. I think the more open you are, the more open your thinking is, there's more resilience there, more ability for creativity and being able to maneuver when you need to maneuver. But if you're in a box, that's pretty restricting.
Yeah. And you're still going to have those people that want still those very defined roles.
Yeah.
Those people are not going away. It's like, they're still stay-at-home moms, and they're stay-at-home, and these stay-at-home moms are fervently stay-at-home moms. They want to be there. It's somebody who has a career looks at that like a prison, but the stay-at-home mom that, she accepts her role of taking care of the children, of keeping the house up, of, all of the, caregiving in terms of the children and, even her husband, right? Like making sure, there's some that want that role. There's others that don't. And when you talk about, this box shouldn't be all in trying to encompass every person in society. And that's where the problems come, where people are arguing, right? Because you have the stay-at-home mom looking at the working woman like, well, you're not taking care of your family. And the working woman is like, well, you're keeping women down. And so, you have this battle. And so when we talk to people from a mental health perspective, you might have one person in the relationship that has a more traditional worldview, a traditional value of what their spouse is going to be and should be doing. And, sometimes it works out that they're aligned. Sometimes they're not aligned. When you're not aligned, you're going to be unhappy. I mean, it's pretty basic understanding. Like, well, y'all have different values, and you're trying to, if you're the woman who doesn't want to be a stay-at-home mom, and you're trying to fit yourself in that box, and you're feeling unfulfilled, and it's going to show. It's going to show in your relationship with your spouse, with your family, possibly, children, anybody, in your immediate families. You're just not going to want to participate. You're going to feel like something is missing or not fulfilled in your life. And, then people don't want to give up sometimes, though, that, that talk about the cognitive dissonance, right? Between wanting to conform because that's what feels like you should be doing, and then also having aspirations for other things. That's
and what about the men who now want to be stay-at-home dads?
Yeah.
I like to just call them stay-at-home parent. Like whether you're a mom or a dad, staying home with your kids and nurturing your children, you're a parent. And so I think we do need to get to the point where we're not labeling, because it is stigmatizing. Like when you say stay-at-home mom, we always have our go-tos, what that means, a stay-at-home mom. And then we also have what our visual is of a stay-at-home dad. How come it can't just be the parent that is in the home and, managing the household, and then you have the parent that is the provider? There's no gender associated with that at all.
And isn't it interesting that when you think of the stay-at-home dad, you imagine a more feminine man? You know, like he's a softer kind of dad. You know, why do we do that, right? Well,
Yeah.
and
why do we think that because he's choosing to stay home that he's not masculine or doesn't have authority, or he's a pussy or
yeah,
whatever, and then she's the alpha because she's out working, and none of those things are true. These are relationships that actually work really well because they talk about it. They make decisions, conscious decisions about this is how we want for our family to be. And I love that, when they're able to talk about that and say, well, this is what my career is like right now. I make this amount of money. This is comfortable for me. This is easy for us. And we both want family. And then they talk about it. And if it's better for one person to be home with the children, more power to you. That's great for your kids.
yeah. And I know now in today's, having to, for example, when a child is born and mothers only, right, we call it maternity leave, paternity leave, but they get only a certain amount of time off, maybe 6 weeks in America. Other countries do it differently.
Oh yeah, they get like a year. They let both parents have off, and it's like a year. And I'm like, man, their kids must be pretty balanced and healthy and all of that because they have two people that really love them, and they're investing in their kids. They're investing like financially and emotionally on both sides, and it's an equitability thing versus an equality thing. I think we need to move away from what's equal and say, well, this is what's equitable in our circumstances.
Yeah.
And there's no gender associated with that either.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to maximize the amount of time to do that in the United States, one parent would take the max that they could take and then switch off, hopefully, to the dad if it's available. And if the dad wants to do that, there's the mindset and perspectives and these expectations that people put not only on themselves but on others, just as our society. Pick a good person. If you're gonna have marriage and children, a lot of young people, I think initially they're thinking they have a good one, but a lot of it is chemical. Like, let's really, this whole, is there such a thing, right, as a love? Is it just chemicals happening that are shooting off that eventually settle down? The definition of love itself is like different for each person. Some people are like, if you love someone, you're going to do things you don't want to do for them. It's like, oh, okay, that's one definition of love. Another one is, right, if you love someone, you can't be without them. And all
that
of
sounds like a song. Some of these songs that are just extreme and ridiculous. You can't live without somebody, and dying without them, and crying and doing all that. It sounds depressing. Like if all of your emotional capital is put into one person, it just sounds restrictive.
All of us in the mental health world would know, like, that is probably not the healthiest way of, in being in a relationship. Of it's, we would already foresee the upcoming trials and tribulations of such set dynamics.
Yeah.
But kind of back to like the women and the purity, like it exists, right? Which is why we have a topic of conversation about it.
Yeah.
So what do you think is something that we can offer up as a advice or tip to women who find themselves feeling like they have to perform in order to have power in any relationship? Like what would you say to someone who is feeling that?
I'm very concerned that people are not authentic. I think authenticity is important, not just for others, but for yourself, being who you really are. And so what I would usually ask women in the military to do, because they had to be so uniform, I would say, well, wear something sexy underneath your uniform. Nobody will know what you're wearing except you know, and you feel sexy, because you chose you went to Victoria's Secrets or something and bought this really cute set of lingerie. Nobody has to know, but when you're
Yeah.
walking around and doing your job, and you feel sexy because for yourself, and you're not performing. The outside, you're performing the uniform and yes sir, yes ma'am, and all of that. All of that's a performance. But on the inside, you know who you are, and you feel sexy because of that. And so that's what I've asked women in the military to do.
Yeah. I bet some military men do it too.
And that's perfectly okay. Be who you are. That's what I'm saying. Be authentic.
Yeah.
And wear something that, and if you're in a relationship, if you're in a relationship where there's a kink relationship, and there's the power dynamic thing, whoever your significant other is, they can tell you to wear something underneath your clothes, and nobody knows but the two of you, and you feel sexy and you feel connected to the person that you're with.
Yeah.
It could be anything. Say, hey, I want you to wear this this little bracelet, or yellow panties, or whatever.
Yeah.
And nobody will know.
Yeah.
But you feel like you're being your authentic self. And so I challenge people to do that. Be who you are.
Yeah, because
Then
right,
Mm-hmm.
the alternative, right? If you're constantly doing things that do not feel authentic to you, that you're doing because you have to play this part,
Yes.
you are automatically headed toward dissatisfaction, unhappiness, because nobody ever, I mean, like, really think about it, right? Nobody ever feels happy doing something that is not them. It eats you from the inside. You on the outside, people are looking at you like they don't have no idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
On the inside, you're like screaming to get out of whatever it is that you're shoving it down. Either way, both of those coping mechanisms harmful are unhealthy. Eventually you're going to break in some way or another. And so don't always, I kind of go back to the balancing. Don't go to the extremes. Don't always do for everybody else because you think that that's what you need to do. And obviously, right, if you do everything for yourself, we know also what that leads to. It's this kind of self-centered, it will also get you in trouble. There should be some sort of flexibility, getting away from these very rigid boxes or lanes, allowing yourself to explore. I mean, people don't even explore what they want anymore. It's like they signed up. Yeah, it's like, think of the kid that played sports, and think Bruce Jenner, right? Is this Olympian at a high level, and everybody knew him as that. Now, what do we know Bruce Jenner as, right? Caitlyn Jenner. And imagine all of that time having to conform to what others saw him as, which was this strong athlete. I mean, this is an extreme case, right? Of like, I mean, it makes it just a visual that you can kind of understand. We're talking about more the, what is powerful roles for women and how they differ from men. So it doesn't have to be in terms of, transgender or transsexual type issues, but even just within women. I mean, there's some women who are more comfortable in a t-shirt and jeans, and there's some women who want, pink nails, pink suit, pink everything. If that's what really makes you happy, go for it. That's what I think we're trying to say.
Yes. So I guess to sum it all up, I think real sexual liberation is about authenticity, and you can still perform, because that's a requirement no matter what, if you're in the workforce. But I don't think you should ever compromise who you are as a person for anything or anyone. And so the sexual liberation part you know, as far as I'm concerned, like there has to be some authenticity there. And that's what I think, how I believe people should think of it. And just do something for yourself that makes you feel sexy and liberated, and you don't have to be announcing it to anybody else.
Yeah, do it.
Yeah, just do it. Well, that was a good one.
Yeah. You know, they need to wear their thongs underneath. And
absolutely. That's what I can't imagine that that's comfortable for anybody. But
I have heard women say it is. And, you know, the whole, right, again, the panty line. You can't have a panty line if you're wearing something tight. Another kind of expectation. But, you know, hey, it's up to you. You want it, do it. You don't want it, don't do it.
I agree. Be who you are. Well, Tanya, this was a great start, because we're just getting started with the podcast. So we kind of picked a sort of vanilla subject. It's a little controversial, but
you know. I'm sure. So, we'll get feedback.
On to our next one.
Yeah.
See you in a bit.